Hi, and welcome to Dream Talks. We have an extra special episode today. We have the Bellamy family. And last week, if you remember, we had Donna on, and she talked about her incredible story as a wife and a mom of 6 kids, moving across the country, making big moves in faith, getting her pilot's license. Her and her husband Will bought a plane and ultimately a flight school. But what we haven't heard is we haven't heard from Will yet, and we haven't heard of his extensive time in the military, particularly in war in a combat zone, and how he's used spiritual intelligence to guide him and his men and to keep them safe, and just a bunch of incredible stories that we want to share with you guys today. And so welcome, Will and Donna. Hi, guys.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being on today. So, yeah, we got a lot of good response, Donna, from your show last week. And so many people, especially those that are flyers or pilots, they were responding and they just thought your faith story was just incredible. And of course, a lot of moms too, with, the 6 kids and everything that you guys have done and been through. You guys are just, you're heroes in the eyes of a lot of our audience, just because your walk of faith is just absolutely incredible. So thank you for being on again.
You're welcome.
So, Will, now, Donna, we're going to talk to you as well. You're not going to be left out, but we do want to talk to Will a little bit. So, you have the distinction of being both a U.S. Marine and a U.S. Soldier, U.S. Army, right?
That's correct. Yeah. In the Army, I was a military policeman.
All right. Wow. So add cop to that too.
Yes,
so you're a Leo and a veteran and a Marine.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. What did you like best, the Army or the Marines? I got to ask.
I got a chance to listen to the general thing, and he said something, when you asked him a question about the difference between the different special forces, the Navy and versus the the SEALs versus the Green Beret. And when I joined the Army, it's different from the Marines, but I agree with him. We all have different missions, and so I don't think one is better than the other per se. I think it's just understanding, the language. Between the two branches and stuff, I found that, I had other former Marines in the Army. We had a tough adjustment period because it was just different, but once we kind of got it, then, it is what it is, just learn the Army's ways.
Yeah. Well, obviously this show will also air on His Glory, and Dave Scarlett is a Marine, but by what I've always heard is there's no such thing as a former Marine.
Mm.
So how do you do that if you're in the Army? You can't say I'm a former Marine. Do you just say I'm a Marine and deal with the abuse, or what?
Well, the funny thing is, it's like once, the only time I got called soldier was in a group setting, but
Okay.
there was probably 4 former Marines inside my unit, and we kind of hung out with each other. And so when leaders would come and they'd address us as the Marines, y'all Marines come over here, even though we're wearing the same uniform as all the other people. That's how they would address us. And, some people, we didn't mind it. We thought it was cool, but some people didn't like that,
So that was probably the joke. What do Marines do when they retire? They join the Army. Because it's so much easier, right? You're like, oh, yeah, after a stint in the Marines, this is like retirement. Were you guys known to be tougher than the rest of the guys?
Boot camp's longer.
Okay.
I know that, I guess it depends on what you're doing. There's definitely a different mindset. I know when I was in Iraq, while I was in the Marines, I ran into some guys from the Army. They were Rangers. We liked them.
Yeah.
We liked them. They was like, those guys fight hard like we do, and some Cav scouts and couple other, a few Green Berets. Yeah, we liked them. It was just, I don't know. We can jive.
Yeah.
So it was
Wow. So Paris Island or San Diego?
Paris Island.
Paris Island. All right.
Yeah.
The place where hopes and dreams are either born or lost or something, right?
Yeah, something like that.
I heard they have really bad sand fleas out there.
It is. It's bad, and they, we found that the drill instructors like to use the sand fleas to play mind games. Because you're not allowed to touch your face and scratch, and so they'll see you swatting, and they'll stand there and make you stand at attention and just let those things just eat you up.
Oh wow,
Just to be fun.
That's just fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, cool. I joined the Navy and I went to Orlando, Florida, and I went in October. So it was a cakewalk as far as the weather. But then I went to officer candidate school in Providence, Rhode Island, I think in the spring, 10 years later. But of course, that was fun because in boot camp, we had, I had just had a warrant officer in the military, in the Navy, but in officer candidate school, we had Marine Corps drill instructors. And of course, I've been in the Navy for 10 years now. So it was like going through boot camp again after, being an E6. So it was fun.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
It was interesting. But of course, by then you just don't take it too seriously. You realize
Right.
what a mind game it was. And you're just like, whatever.
Yeah.
But so you did, you did some tours in Iraq. Were you in Afghanistan or just Iraq or what?
No, I did 2 tours in Iraq, and I did a tour with the Army to Haiti for riot control, security, things of that nature as an MP. After that earthquake, and was that 2010? Yeah.
Wow. So was this Iraq round one first person Gulf War or the second?
The second one.
Okay. Yeah, I was in during the liberation of Kuwait. So Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Southern Watch.
Right. Yeah. My dad was in that one. He was involved with that one.
Wow. Way to make me feel old. That was in that war. Yeah. Wow, that's cool. So the second round, so that obviously was after 9/11 then.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
OIF 1 and 2. And then I think by the time we left, we were just getting into OIF 3. So.
Wow, that's a pretty serious time, as we're seeing.
Well, the OIF 1 was different. It was the initial push. It got kind of it was rough. But then towards the end of our deployment, we had canvas doors on our Humvees and no ballistic glass. And I remember driving, we were going through the heart of Baghdad, and the people could touch us in the vehicles, and they liked us. And then the second tour, the looks on their faces, it was different. It was drastically different. You needed the armor, you needed the that kind of stuff, because it was just different. Completely different.
Yeah, it was get the heck out of here. We're free now. Go home. We want to rule ourselves. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you have any close calls where you were over there?
I did. I had a few. Yeah.
And we were talking just before we hit record here, and you were telling me there were 3 stories in particular, but I think the one that stuck with me the most was, and initially Donna was telling me about this, was, excuse me, I just know it as the daisy chain story. And now you had how long have you been Christian, spirit-filled, walking with the Lord?
Since I was, as far as I can remember, but really, praying in tongues, spirit-filled, I would say 13. I'm soon to be 41.
So all your time in the military, you had that relationship with God, and
yes. now I kind of, I maintained my relationship, but I kind of got a little slack for a while in the military.
Okay.
And it kind of goes back to last week's story about the dream that I had on being on the ship, the cruise ship.
Tell us that dream, will you?
Okay, so at this time, I think we had just moved back from Australia. I got out the Marine Corps, and I was kind of in a weird place. Kind of a little upset of how some things happened in Iraq while we were there. I was questioning things, and so I was due to
PTSD.
Yeah, I had PTSD. Didn't know it. Things were just different, and my wife, she wanted to go back home, and so I don't recall ever praying, not one time seeking the Lord on that move. We just, as soon as I sent them ahead.
Well, just to be clear, this was so he was in the Marine Corps, and as soon as he was going to leave the Marine Corps, I wanted to go back to Australia because I was homesick. And so he said, okay, and we went. And that was the first and only time that we didn't seek the Lord on where to move and when. And it was just, it wasn't a great time. Every time after that, it was led of the Lord, and we could see the fruit of it. But this was a really great example for us of what not to do. And it was a
hard lesson.
It was a hard lesson. So we were in Australia, and then we moved back to the US only about just over a year later, I think.
That's a long way to move.
Yeah. That was a tough lesson. I mean, God's grace. We could keep we could breathe. Our head was above water, just above water. Gosh, that was a rough time. Just not being in the place where He wanted us to do, to be, and so.
So we moved to.
So we moved back to Statesville, North Carolina, and I got plugged into the VA, and I was kind of circling the drain. I just started getting plugged into the VA. They started telling me about PTSD, and that's when I first started learning about it. Because at that time, the military really didn't talk a whole lot about PTSD. Now, they're very well versed in it. But so I was kind of in a rough patch, and one night I had a dream, and we were on a cruise ship. Now, two passions that I have is barbecue and fishing. I can do it all day, every day. And so while we're on this cruise ship, my wife is at the front of the cruise ship. I'm at the back. And periodically I would go up to the front and check on her, make sure she's good. She's got everything she needs. And then I'll go back to the back of the ship and fish. And I continued to do that back and forth for a period of time. And all of a sudden, I don't know if it was commotion or whatnot. I look back and I could see there was this giant wave coming towards the ship. And people were panicking. I'm pushing my way through the people in the crowds, trying to make my way to get to her. And the wave hits, and I just don't get there in time. And she's knocked off into the water. And, I look down and I jump in, she's face down in the water. And as soon as I saw that she was face down, she was just out, I just woke up. I've never experienced, like, I could taste the salt water in my mouth. I can feel the sunshine. It was one of the most lucid dreams that I have ever had. And when I woke up, I was salty. I was completely soaked, just head to toe. Can't explain that. But I knew right away that was a message, and I knew exactly what I was supposed to do. I was just in that place to where I was not, at that time, Donna had began pressing into the Lord and really seeking the Lord on things. And I was just kind of, I wasn't going the other way, but I wasn't, I was just pacing, just kind of cruising. I wasn't really pushing in like I should have. Therefore, I wasn't really leading my family like I should have. and that shook me up. And I haven't looked back ever since I've had that dream. It's just, of course we get ups and downs and stuff, but I shake it off. That dream always reminds me of what I'm supposed to be doing.
Wow, that's a pretty intense dream, especially, having that feeling of the salt water and the taste in your mouth and the smell and the feeling of the sun. That almost feels, it's interesting because a lot of times in the dream world we talk about the difference between a dream and an encounter, and sometimes you just don't know. It feels so real. It's like you were actually there. And I've had people do that with historic dreams where they show up at like the JFK inauguration and they can describe the weather. And the weather at that inauguration was unlike any other time in the last 80 years at a presidential inauguration. And so then it's like, did God give them a dream that was so vivid and historically accurate? Or is there just some way that God took them to that time and space where they could feel the whole essence of what was going on? And it sounds like, waking up completely drenched and feeling the taste of salt water and everything, then that's a really, really vivid experience. That's amazing. So that shifted your spiritual life from then on, huh?
It did. Scared me to death.
Wow.
That was a rough dream, but it got my attention.
It sure did. That was amazing. Wow. Okay. So when you're in Iraq, you have a relationship with God. You obviously know how to hear the voice of God. Did you have a lot of dreams or visions when you were over there that you can remember?
I don't remember dreaming a whole lot, but I got impressions when things were probably not going to go well for us. And so I would just begin to pray over our platoon, pray over, the mission and things of that nature. And because I didn't know why I felt that, because I didn't always feel that way. We did tons and tons of missions, but there'd just be a few times where I can't sleep and I'm just pacing because just something doesn't feel right. Now, sometimes I would pace and be up, everyone else is asleep, and the mortars would come in and I'm up already and start yelling and tell everyone to take cover because the base that we were at, we'd get mortars. They just lob mortars in, sometimes breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then during Ramadan, it was insane how many times our base would just get mortared. And so I would just use that time because I didn't know what was going, happening. Like, Lord, what is this? What am I feeling? And I would just begin to pray.
Wow. Did anybody ever get hurt with all those mortars coming into the base?
Not from actually, I take that back. So our company, we had one guy, he took some shrapnel to the eye, actually, and I got a couple bumps on my head. We had a 91 millimeter rocket go straight over our hooch where we slept. Didn't hit the building, but it hit just on the other side, and it blew us all into the one corner of the building. And this guy that did get the shrapnel, he was headed to the chow hall. But other people, other units, some of the Navy people, they lost some lives from a mortar hitting their quarters, things of that nature.
Wow. So probably the most dangerous place for you was out on patrol, right?
Out on patrol, yeah.
Yeah. Tell me some of those stories and how God led you through those times.
So our primary mission, when it changed a few times, but my second deployment, it was to do convoy ops and pull security, transport people, mounted patrols for different units. So that was our primary mission. And so during that time, when you roll out of that gate, the biggest threat on the road was the IEDs at that time. Then it kind of progressed into the EMPs or not EMPs, but the shape charges. I forget what they call them now. that became a real issue later. We had heard about it. It was kind of more north that they started using those devices. It hadn't quite come down to where we're operating, but the roadside bombs, that was our biggest threats. And so one particular time, I got chosen to be the recon vehicle, and so just for our mission purposes, we would stage our convoys in a certain order, just for tactical reasons. And so I was part of the recon element this time, and I didn't like it, simply because of just the extra stress, because not only are you making sure we're making, we're taking the right turns to get to our destination, but you're constantly scanning for roadside bombs, any IEDs, anything like that, stuff out of the that's not usually there, dead animals, and as we would roll out, you just try to take a mental note of what's on the road, especially in the areas that we normally operated at. So like if there was a dead donkey that's obviously decaying and it stinks and it's deflated, and then all of a sudden you roll past that, you get close to that donkey, and all of a sudden it looks full again. Well, you need to stop, because they would do tactics like that. So you're always scanning, you're always on alert, always looking, because one of the things that was always rolling through my head, and one of the things I would pray about, was like, Lord, don't let me miss something. And it's so easy to do, simply because there's just trash everywhere. There's debris everywhere. There's rocks everywhere. It's just impossible to see everything and recognize everything when you're in a vehicle and you're rolling down the highway. And so this particular time, we're headed to a base to pick up someone. And it was a cloudy day. The whole morning it was cloudy, and so I'm lead vehicle. And we head out into this desert area, and it's flat. You can see there was one little mountain, little area close to the road, but you could see for miles. It's so flat, just sand. And all of a sudden, and this whole time, I don't feel good about this mission, even though it's relatively simple. I'm not really feeling good about it. So while doing the job, I'm praying. And all of a sudden, the clouds open up, and I see the sun rays come through. And, I'm like, that's cool. And I look out, I scan way ahead of the vehicle, down the road, and I just see a discoloration, just off to the side of the highway. And I look past that, and there's another discoloration. And I look further, and there's another, and it's getting harder and harder to see that discoloration. And then the clouds close back up. That sunlight's gone, and it just looks like sand. And so I go ahead and tell my driver to stop. The main body of the convoy is, they're still miles behind us. Tell the other gun truck, that we're going to stop. I think I might have seen something. And I'm looking. Now it's on me to make the call. We're on a time crunch. Did I really see something? How long does EOD take to come out there and check it out? We could sit there for 3, 4, 5, 8 hours for them to come out there, and I could be wrong. And I'm like, well, if I'm wrong, then I can live with that. They're going to chew me out and whatnot. I can live with that. But what if I second guess myself, and I did see something, and someone rolls through and someone dies? That would be kind of harder to deal with. And I'm like, Lord, what did you show me that? What was that? So finally, I'm like, you know what? This whole morning I hadn't felt good. This is probably it. And so I call main body, tell our lieutenant. I said, sir, we got possible daisy chain up here. And he was like, "Are you sure?" "No, sir, I'm not really sure, but this is what I saw. We need to get ELD." He was like, "Well, you better be right because we're on a time crunch and it's going to take them hours." I said, "Sir, we got to stop." So we stopped. We sit there for 3 to 5 hours. We've had several of these events. It was out of 3 or 5 hours. We sit there for a while. The ELD finally comes up. They rolled a robot out there that just got this brand new $250,000 robot. Run it over to that first place where I thought I saw that first dark spot, and they blow it. They blow it, and it was a 12 bomb daisy chain spread out 100 meters apart. It would have taken out probably half the main body of our convoy. Blew the robot all to pieces. That was kind of funny because they were like, "We just got that," So, but oh man, that was one that I'm like, "Lord, thank you," because that one would have hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have lost. That would have been a lot of damage, and that would have been a rough one to bear on your conscience if you hadn't made the uncomfortable decision to. So, but what you saw is when the clouds parted, you saw physically. Do you believe you saw the road ahead of you, or do you believe that God was like giving you an open vision of what was happening in front of you?
No, so when the clouds moved, it was just a hole in the clouds. And the sun rays came through. I could see discoloration off the side, like someone had dug a hole.
Yes, actual sun.
So it was an actual sun that came through, but it was only out just brief, enough for me to just see the discoloration. Kind of, the further it went out, it was harder and harder to see. But I noticed that definitely the first 3, I'm like, okay, that's probably something. And then the clouds closed up, and I couldn't see it again. And so
could verify it once it was cloudy again. Nobody could see what you saw.
You couldn't see it. And then, and creeping up there, they know that something's up. Why are they slowing down? They could have just taken out just the 2 trucks at that time before the main body, because obviously we figured it out,
Wow. That's crazy. That's one of those things. It's almost like being a dreamer or a seer when God gives you a special ability to see something in a moment, and then you're trying to bring a warning to people that could literally save their lives, and nobody sees what you see, and everybody's irritated because they don't see it, and you're disrupting the normal course of their lives. We got places to go and people to see, and you want to sit here for 5 hours and wait for a EOD, explosive ordnance disposal team, to come and reckon the road safe when people are just like, man, if this is nothing, we're not going to let you eat for a week. There'd to be all kinds of irritated at you. But of course, everybody shuts up as soon as the $250,000 robot goes out there and blows up. Then they're like, oh, dang, I'm so glad for Will.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So God was looking out for you. Yeah, I like that because, it's one of those divine moments. It's like people question me all the time on stuff related to the seer gift. Like, was that a dream or was that an encounter? And it really becomes like, does it matter? Like, were you actually on a cruise ship and then thrown into the ocean when you had your dream, and then you woke up drenched and feeling the salt water, or did God just make it supernaturally happen that way, that you experienced everything as if you were there? And I don't know that there's necessarily a difference. I don't know that if there is a difference, I don't know if it's important, but it's kind of that thing. It's like the clouds parted. It's just a hole in the clouds for just a minute for you to be able to see what you needed to see. And God made sure you saw it, and you made the call, and that was it. It wasn't for anybody else to see. Nobody else needed to verify it. And you had to stand in the strength of what you knew, even though it was uncomfortable, even though it was a difficult position. And you were, the whole thing was on you.
Right.
How many people were in that convoy that were waiting for 5 hours?
We were approximately, I'd say 40 vehicles strong.
Oh, wow. Man, so you had a lot of irritated people.
Yeah, we feel, 5 people most of the time. Sometimes we had an empty seat, but yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any dignitaries?
No, we were actually headed to go pick up somebody, and I wasn't sure who it was. It was somebody important.
Mhm.
And so, just had to tell them, hey, we're stuck with this whole bomb deal. Possible. And that was the other thing that I was just like, man, if that guy's going to get upset, then he's going to start chewing, and it's just going to all roll downhill, and just.
And weren't they giving you a lot of pressure while you're sitting there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You had your peers and you're like, are you sure? No, I'm not sure, man. I'm not sure. But I don't, it was just, it is what it is. I'll take the butt chewing. I'd rather, everyone live and chew me out and think I'm just some, scaredy cat or some time waster than, roll through that and someone dies,
Yeah, that's for sure. Wow, that's crazy. Let me just share a brief story. I had a situation like that. We were the first Persian Gulf War, and we were headed through the Straits of Hormuz, and it's right at the mouth of the Gulf, and you're within missile range, I think, from both Iran and Iraq at that point. And obviously, it's a very vulnerable place to be. And when you're an aircraft carrier, you're surrounded by as much as 13 other ships in the battle group, and there's 6,000 guys, 88 planes just on your boat. So an aircraft carrier battle group can be 10,000 people. And of course, there's typically the battle group commander, which is an admiral who's on there, and so there's that whole thing. We're going through the Straits of Hormuz, and I was on watch as the load dispatcher, which is the guy that controls all electrical power on board the ship. And we're trained both as a nuclear operator, but also as an electrical control operator. And so I was a load dispatcher. And most of the time it's 5 hours staring at a wall with 120 indicator lights and nothing moves and nothing happens. And it's boring as heck. I heard somebody say war is massive periods of intense boredom followed by a few moments of sheer terror.
Yeah.
And so that's what it was. We're going through the Straits of Hormuz. We actually had one plant down. So we have 2 nuclear power plants. One plant is operating. The other plant is down. And we have 4,160 volt generators in what's called the ring bus. So 2 share load at the top and 2 share load at the bottom. And I can see it all in front of me on this massive, like 12 foot by 20 foot wall, just filled with indicator lights. And I can see what everything's doing. And what happened was one of the generators oversped, which meant it tripped off, and all of the load, because it was sharing load with the other generator, transferred to the other generator, and that generator overloaded, and so that one tripped off. And so we lose literally half of our electrical power in like a second. Well, when those trip off, what you're supposed to do so they don't brown out is you open the breaker so instead of browning out, it just cuts power. Well, we have 2 electrical operators, and it goes boom, 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 and then we lose a third one. And what happened was the one electrical operator made a mistake, and he opened the wrong breaker of a generator that was still running. So what happened in effect is we lost 3 generators like in 2 seconds.
Oh, cow.
And so I had to make a call. What do you do? And the first thing you do is you take your phone off the hook, because the captain will call, the captain of your department will call, the admiral will call, and if we have a loss of all AC, then we're dead in the water. We can't move. And it's a loss of propulsion. And a loss of propulsion for an aircraft carrier means the whole battle group stops too. So you talk about people waiting on you, like, who the heck is running this ship? So I made the decision in that split second that the fastest way to recover from losing 3 generators at once was to kill the 4th generator, which would kill one plant, which means we would have a loss of all AC and a loss of all propulsion, because both of our nuclear power plants would be shut down. But it would start air motors that would speed up 4 diesel generators, and in 13 seconds I could begin to connect electrical power back. But what happened was we don't operate on a battery like a diesel boat does or something. We're too big. And so we have to have an operating nuclear power plant in order to have propulsion, because we're steam driven. So the second I told that guy to cut that last breaker and we lost all AC, the lights went out, 13 seconds later, the emergency lights came on, the diesel generators powered up, and I started putting all, it's about a 2-hour process to bring all the lights back on and stuff. And of course, if you have planes in the air, they can't land. Pilots can be running out of fuel. I mean, people can die if you don't do this right. And the watch commander next to me looked over at me and he goes, you just scrammed one plant. Well, to scram a plant is to force shut down a nuclear power plant accidentally. And it's like a federal incident. Like they will fly out a team from DC and they will brief you on what happened. Why did you do that? Have a big post-mortem on the event. And the funny thing is we never had a post-mortem. Like they just tell you, hey, you scrambled one plant. I was like, yeah, leave me alone. Like I gotta fix this. And so I'm giving orders and bringing the power back in and loading up the most vital load centers so we can raise the rods on 1 and 2 and we can bring them back so we can have propulsion. So, we have 88 planes, but we have no offensive weapons, which is why we have the frigates and the guided missiles, destroyers, and all of that stuff around us to protect us in case we get something coming in, because an aircraft carrier is one of the most vulnerable ships in the Navy. And so the whole battle group has to stop dead in the water in the Straits of Hormuz because of a decision I made as the best way to recover from this casualty. But the funny thing is by the grace of God, they never did a post-mortem on it. They must have looked at it and said that was really the only decision he could have made. And so I didn't hear a word from it from that situation. But just albeit to say, I've been in the hot seat where you got to make a decision and everybody has to sit around like, why we stopped? What the heck is going on? Who's the joker that told us we're not moving forward? And yeah, that's me.
That's crazy.
That's a fun place to be.
Wow. Humbling.
You're a little bit more harrowing than mine. Ours was just a glitch in a generator and we ended up, nobody bombed us. Nobody fired anything. There was no explosions. I think the closest we came to inherent danger, I was on the USS Abraham Lincoln in the first Persian Gulf War. We're the first carrier group to operate inside the Persian Gulf. And we came within 9 miles of a mine, which of course is laughable because you guys are literally driving over them every day. So different world, man. But man, thank you so much for being on the very, very bitter edge of the tip of the spear and keeping us safe and fighting for justice and liberty. And man, that's a different kind of service than what I did. And my hat's off to you, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, did you have other situations like this? Because this situation obviously saved a lot of lives by the fact that you saw what you saw and you stood up and would not be moved as other people just tried to convince you that they didn't see anything and wanted to keep going. Did you have other situations like this?
Yeah, so I had another one where, and really it was me or my gun truck that would have been, we would have been just blown to smithereens. But so again, I was like recon vehicle, and so we're heading down the highway, and so like I said earlier, we'd look for different, debris and things that just doesn't really make sense to be there that could be possibly bombs. Also potholes. Potholes was a common thing that they would quick because they can pull their vehicle up and quickly throw a mine or something inside that pothole and then drive off. And then just wait for someone to be, another unit to be coming through and then blow it. And so I was scanning and we run up to this big pothole that's more in the middle, kind of where we normally ride. We don't ride in the lanes like you normally do, simply because the roadside bumps. We want to create some distance. We have armor, so you want distance. Distance is your friend, with a lot of bumps. So we rode down the center. And so this pothole, which we've been on this route before, didn't recognize it. And it's kind of more in the middle, towards the middle. And so we had to kind of go around it close. So I get within, just in range where we can either use binoculars. And I had my gunner up in the turret. I said, hey, can you see down in there? And he's like, no, it's too deep, And so, I tell my driver to inch a little closer, and hoping that he sees something in there. and he still can't see. So, we keep inching up and kind of squeeze, try to squeeze around it and stuff. And he still cannot see what's down in there from his height. And we pretty much get to the point to where, he now can see, and I can see out my window that I can see the fins. I couldn't see down. I couldn't see as far as he could. I can at least see the fins. And, once I look down out that window, I'm like, I'm trying to get the words go, because I'm literally looking at the fins of this. It turns out it was a 120 mortar that was shoved down in there. And I looked past, and there was some shacks that was, several hundred yards off the road. And there's a guy in the window, and I'm trying to get the words go, because we're literally sitting right on top of this thing. And finally, my driver takes off, and we get on the other side of it within, safe range. And, we stop the main body of the convoy. I call it in, for us to get EOD to come out. And we sit there for 3 to 5 hours for EOD to come out there, and they send their little robot over. And I, I'm not EOD guy, but use the robot to just pull the electronics off the mine. I mean the mortar. And because the movies, you pull the wrong wire, it'll blow up. But I don't know. Right? I'm not that. I'm not in that field. So they just rip the components and bring it back. And we look at the components. The components were crushed. And what they guess is because that's a 120 is a huge mine. I mean, mortar. And they think that they probably pulled up in a vehicle and just chucked it out as fast as they could. And the weight of it crushed the components. And oh boy, in the stinking window couldn't, remote detonate it because it was broken.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
well, how do you feel?
Huh?
I was going to ask Donna, how do you feel as a wife hearing these stories when your husband comes back? Or
well, he told me about some of the stories the first time he went there, because the first time he went there, it was on the way back when he was on the ship is when we met. And so the second deployment that he went to was the first time that, I knew him, and I was pregnant with our first child at the time. Mm-hmm. And so, I would constantly be, the enemy would be speaking to me and saying, that I'm going to be raising this baby by myself, and that he's not going to come home. And I had to, fight those lies, and I would have to remind myself of all the stories that he has where the Lord kept him safe, that he's going to do it for him again. Mm-hmm. And so I would just use those stories to comfort my heart that he was going to come home.
And there was one time where we had Yahoo Messenger, because you had the webcam.
Was it back in 2000?
That was 2003?
No, it's 2004, the second time.
And so, and that's how I could see her, see the baby, and we can communicate. And so we're at the cafe where we had all the internet cafe, and we're talking and stuff. And, I hear boom. And I kind of look, to the side, I know that's incoming. And Donna hears the boom. And so she was like, what was that? And I was like, that's outgoing and stuff. Cause I didn't want her getting nervous and stuff. And so we keep talking.
Honey, it's okay.
It's fine. It's fine. And I hear a second, boom. And I kind of look around. I can feel the vibration. And I'm just like, okay, is this one of those volleys? Because they would do these sometimes, 3 to 12 volleys of just mortars coming in. I'm like, wow, please don't do that now. And so I continue to talk, and I'm trying to, stay cool. And then all of a sudden I hear the next one, and it boom, and it hits the building I'm in, hits the antennas. All power goes out. Just dust and everything, and the internet's cut. And more and more mortars are coming in and stuff. And so I grabbed my stuff and, running as fast as we could to get to the bunkers, because we thought it was just another volley. And you wait till everything settles. And I'm like, I cannot leave this like that. And so as soon as I thought the coast was clear, I ran back to my hut because I also carried a satellite phone. And, you're not supposed to do that, government phone. But I made a phone call. I'm like, hey, I'm just want to let you know, that was incoming, but I'm good. I'm safe. So I got to go. I can't be on here. Boop.
Wow. What were you feeling on your side, Donna? Were you freaking out?
I think I probably didn't have a good grasp of what was really happening because I don't remember freaking out. So I don't think I really had a good grasp of what was happening. Yeah.
Yeah, that's insane. That's crazy. Yeah, man, I feel so old, man. When I was in, we had to go up to the Mars nest, which was just a little shack, and we had a ham radio operator who would use a ham radio to call somebody back in the States who would make a collect call to our house, and we could talk via ham radio operator to our wives. We had no cell phones, we had no internet. This was late 80s, early 90s that I was deployed on the Abraham Lincoln, and we didn't have any of that stuff. We didn't even have emails back then.
Well, Will even feels old because a lot of the new Marines are making statements like that they're peacetime Marines, that they've never been to war, and we're just like, wait a minute. And so like that,
has it been that long?
Like all of a sudden, like we feel old because the war was like almost 20 years ago now.
Wow.
When he went, and so we're already feeling old ourselves.
I know. Wow, that's crazy. Funny how time flies and the times change and the way we communicate changes too. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So you had another story too, as I recall, that was somewhat like this, right?
Yeah, the mortar ambush. One of the things we didn't like doing these type of missions, but when things kind of calmed down in Fallujah, they had us do different odds and ends missions, and in this particular one, we got told to go check out a rocket that was in some compound, Iraqi compound, and and just see what it is because I guess the locals wanted us to deal with it or something. And so, anyways, we go, and it's inside a barricaded compound, and it has the not hangers, the half moon. It has it looks like half moon.
The ammunition places?
No, it wasn't ammunition. No, but it was like these metal half.
I know what you mean. I forget the name too.
I can't remember the name of them, but long buildings. It looks like just a half circle of a hangar, and it had a bunch of them all staged inside this compound. And there was a huge metal door that was locked, and so they had to unlock it to allow my platoon to drive in. And so, we drive in, and my platoon, we stage around the compound, and me, my LT, and a couple other people, we go and we meet with the local that I guess made the complaint. We have a translator with us, and, we walk over to him, and the whole time, like, my heart's beating, something doesn't feel right. Like, this is off, like something's off, like, Lord, protect us. Lord, just protect the platoon, protect us. Lord, what is this? What am I feeling? And so we get over to the locals, and they're sitting down in a circle, and I'm looking at their eyes. The eyes just, the window to the soul. The eyes just gave it away. I'm like, this is a setup. I mean, with the feeling I was feeling, and I'm just looking at it, and yes, they had it was a 91 millimeter rocket that was stuck in the ground, a dud, well, possibly a dud, but it was stuck in the ground. It didn't blow up. And we're just like, yep, yeah, there's a rocket there. It's not ours, but whatever. And I'm looking at these guys. Just the way they look, it was off. It was really off. I'm like, sir, we got to get out of here. I said, sir, this is not good. I said, this is a setup. I said, sir, we got to get out of here. He's like, yeah, let's roll out. So, and I get a guy comes over the radio that's staged at the gate. He was like, hey, this dude's over here trying to lock the gate. you know, and we're like, you know, stopping from locking it. We got to roll out. And I told the guys to mount up. And so we start pulling out. We're kind of walking, you know, we didn't turn our backs to them and stuff. And then as we're kind of walking and they kind of stand up, they know something is coming. And it was just this weird feeling. And all of a sudden we hear a mortar fly over and it hits off just outside the compound. We're just like, ooh, you know, and then we hear another one fly over and it hits within the compound. And so we take off running back to the vehicle because we realize, okay, they're trying to get us. They know that we're in the compound. We're staged inside there and locked in. The guy had locked the door and tried to get away, but one of my guys grabbed him and pretty much he didn't want to unlock the door. So he ended up with, you know, he got persuaded with something cold to, you know, unlock that door. And so he, you know, gladly unlocked the door and we started pushing out. And I remember the mortars were coming in so fast and just hitting all around. The shrapnel's flying around the vehicles. And my driver just takes off. And so I literally tried to squeeze, you know, my ballistic window was probably about that big. I'm sitting there. There's no way with all the armor, you can't get in there, but I'm like, just go, you know, I'm holding on and stuff just to get out of that compound. Cause that was the bullseye, you know.
That is crazy. What an incredible experience. And man, how awesome it was that God was with you and protected you and your whole squad during that time. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, did you say that at one point that you didn't lose any members of your squad while you were over there, right?
No, not in our platoon.
Wow, that's amazing.
I think it was 2 from the company, if I remember, or 4. Might have been 4 for the company, but not.
Is that when you were in Kilo?
Yeah.
But wasn't Kilo the one that they were losing everybody, and that's
No. That's 2 too. So I got a friend of mine that worked security when I was a security guard up at Karis Bible College. He was with a unit that I almost got sent to because, you know, I was a field radio operator. And so I dealt with a lot of the and that's one reason why I had a satellite phone. I was the radio chief. And so they had lost so many guys in Fallujah that my communications chief wanted to send me over to help fill in the numbers. I think they were down to maybe 4 guys. And so, yeah.
That's crazy. Wow. So interesting. So what do you feel like the time that God led you the most while you were in the military? And I could have 3 stories, but that you just were very, very cognizant of what we call spiritual intelligence, either knowing something that you would have no way of knowing, or getting a vision or a dream, or even that gut feeling that you would get when you would pace sometimes. What do you feel like the most pronounced time while you were in the service that happened was?
I'd have to say, I think, you know, pressure kind of causes us to kind of focus in. Mm-hmm. I would say it was doing both of those deployments because, you know, I wanted to come home and I wanted my guys to come home. And so I really just spent more time praying and trying to get that quiet time just to figure out, Lord, you know, like what routes to take, or if I felt something to just, you know, I thought at one point I said, well, maybe I'm just here to intercept, you know, be an intercessor or something, because we still got to go, you know, and just, I don't know. I guess during my military time, it would be around my deployments.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And being a voice sometimes, you know, when I get together, all the senior sergeants and staff sergeant and our LT, when we, you know, try to come up with plans, you know, I'd get information to be able to voice an opinion on what we, you know, a suggestion
Mm.
on how we should do something. And, and sometimes, he used it and it worked out great. And other times it was just like, no, we're not going to do that, and it didn't go so great.
Wow. Well, what I love about the two of you guys is how, God is speaking to you, God is speaking to your wife, Donna, and then God is speaking to both of you. So shift gears a little bit. And you talked about how God basically had you step up as the spiritual leader of your household through this harrowing dream and the saltwater experience. You talked about that at the beginning, but talk about kind of what you guys are into now, pilots training, flight school, owning airplanes, and all of that, and how God has led you through that process, and even your side of the moving back. We heard about the move to Australia, but then the move back, and how just the whole space A thing. We heard some of that from Donna last week, but I would just love to hear from your side. But also, Donna, feel free to chime in, just how the two of you hear God together as a couple.
Okay. Oh, where should I start?
Well, I think that the first thing is I do journaling, and that's one of the really good ways that I can hear the Lord without, and get outside of myself, where I have my like a journal like this, and I write on it the date, and I start, I talk to the Lord, but I write what I'm saying to him, and then I'll say, Lord, what do you have to say to me? And I'll listen. And as I'm hearing what he's saying, I'm writing it. I'm not like really being discerning about what I'm hearing. I'm not trying to get in my head about it. I'm just writing as I hear. And then later I look back and I make sure it's in line with scripture and whatnot. And when we were because when we came to Australia, the Lord had us go on a commercial flight, and he gave us the cash money to do it. And, we could have easily have thought, okay, God, you're going to do that again, right? But I remember one night I was in bed and I had my journal, and I said, Lord, how do you want us to go back to America? And I heard him say, space available. And my mind was just like, that's crazy. That's suicide, going space available. But I told Will, and so the thing about Will is I'll tell him what I hear the Lord saying, but I really rely on him to be the final word. And so he takes what I say, and then he runs it to the Lord to see, what does he feel about it? Does he feel like that's what the Lord's saying? So he doesn't just go by what I hear, but he double checks. And then when we're both in agreement, that's when we move.
Well, sometimes it's just like, I don't like, for us coming back to America this last time, I know that Australia, we had it really, really nice in Australia, and we're making more money we've ever made in our life at that time, and it was really good. But I got to staring up inside that, to where just this unrest. I'd go to work, happy, and just, but then all of a sudden, just there's a shift to where I'm like, why? I start to question, like, okay, what's happened? Like just yesterday I enjoyed doing this. Why does it feel like such a drag now? And so then, and what I start doing is I'll check myself first, okay, am I just having a bad day? Do I feel good? Is it something that, am I thinking stupid things, and then I'm like, well, no, I'm not really doing that. Okay, well, is it the enemy? And I'll kind of go through that checklist and stuff, and, well, nothing's really checking out. And then all of a sudden, and then I'm like, well, Lord, is this you? And I feel this peace, and, but I'll still be kind of unsure. And so I will just keep my mouth shut for a while, and I'll just chew on it and just keep seeking the Lord about it. And it's not until I'm like, I get that confirmation, then I'll bring it to her. And I remember I sent this text this last time. I think I had just mentioned it, just to kind of plant a seed, just to see where she's at. She was like, no, God, wouldn't just, he wouldn't just send us here just to turn us around to go right back. He wouldn't do that, would he? I'm like, he can do whatever he wants. Our job is to be obedient, and so I kind of just I said, well, just pray about it. Let's just drop it and let's just pray about it. And I remember, I think it was that Monday, I went back to work and I was kind of walking my beat, and I sent her a text. I was in the alleyway and I sent her a text. I said, hey, Donna, do you think the Lord's wanting us to go back to America now? And then about 45 minutes later, I get this text with a little tear with the emoji with a tear. She was like, yeah, I think it's time for us to go. And so then at that point, it's just, okay, God, how do we do this? And my thing is, it's like, we've got to find God's plan and his timing. We've got to get all three of those right if we're going to, hit it right on the head. And so, we just start moving, taking baby steps. Donna is she's very organized with notes and things of that nature. That's not my thing. I'm more right brain. And then we just get a list going and stuff. Okay, so what's got to be done first? And we just start just getting stuff down and just start making some plans, small plans. And just see where it goes. And if the door keeps opening and things keep flowing, we just keep going. And, and it wasn't until, what she just said about the whole space available, because I was just like, Lord, how? Yes, you did the whole, commercial way back. Is that what you want? Because we have this, Lord, I know you can bring more money in. When do you want us to go? What is the route? How do you want us to do this? And and I had been already thinking, man, it would be nice to do space available. I would like my family to experience that because, my dad been in the service. We've done that, bouncing around. And I always loved it as a kid. And so, and I wanted her to see what it was like to be on a military aircraft, C-17 or C-5 or C-130. That would have been rough. But
kids would probably
cargo net seats. That would have been awesome.
You're like, stop, time to jump.
yeah, I can't take this no more. So, we just keep taking baby steps, and as the Lord keeps opening the doors, I found that it also increases, as stuff starts going, kind of your faith starts to increase as you start to see, God's in this, and you're in the place where He wants you to be. And so that was the deal for us. Just I knew it was going to be a challenge, and I'm not the nicest guy when I'm in mission mode, because that's my goal. Is okay, God said we're going there. And it's my job as the head of the household to help get us there. With the Lord's strength, we'll get there. That's the mode I get into. Mission mode.
I know mission mode well.
She's the one that came up with that. Well, you're still in mission mode. I'm like, the mission's not done. We got to keep going. And so it was a little stressy, but there was a grace to it, though. Even though it was difficult to move a family that size, there was also at the same time an ease, because we knew that this is what God wanted us to do. So even when we got stuck in Guam, almost got stuck in Guam, when we didn't know anything about that whole license or paperwork that we had to submit for her immigration. Mm-hmm. We didn't know anything about that. No one mentioned anything. We didn't even think about researching that. Mm-hmm. And then here we are, they're already loading the plane. We're in front. He's doing this in front of everybody too. And they're all loading up, and we're the last ones in this room. And he's just like, yeah, you don't have a permanent residency anymore. So it was just like, okay, God, this is your baby. This is your baby. You said go. You told us to go this route. This is you got to fix this. You got to fix this. You got to fix this. And I was just sitting there in front. I was standing there because we're just praying. I'm like, okay, Lord, there's no other birds going back to Australia for weeks. So you got to fix this. And as the last person loads the plane, he comes in and he stamps, waves everything, and just does everything right there. We still got that paperwork, don't we?
Yeah, I had to keep it. I had to keep it in my passport for like so many years until I got my citizenship.
Yeah. And then, and then we loaded up on the plane, and so I was just like, man. And then hooking us up in Hawaii, like that made no sense to me as far as the favor. Like I found out that there was an earlier flight. It was a 28-hour layover, but there was a flight leaving in 12 hours. And so I was like, well, let's just get on that one instead of sitting here for 28 hours. And so I go and check in on that. I said, ma'am, we're on this flight, but I heard that there's one leaving in 12 hours. She was like, honey, you don't want to do that. I'm like, well, why not? We're on the one, and I don't want to sit here with my family for 28 hours. And she was like, look behind you. And it was like the whole FBO was USO. Was it USO?
The airport.
Whatever. Was full. It was about 600 people, kids, people in uniform. Just like, she was like, you would never, if I take you off that list, you will never get out of here, because then Hawaii, I'm at the bottom of the list. I'm like, well, why are we different? She was like, I don't know why, but you've been manifested as cargo. You got to go all the way there. So I'm like, leave it. I don't know how that happened. Thank you, Jesus. Leave it. Just leave it. And I saw how miserable everyone was sitting, because for whatever reason, you weren't allowed to lay down on the floor. The kids could do it, but adults couldn't lay down on the floor. You couldn't, Dawn and I tried to put our back to each other to sleep, and they'd come and wake us up. Sir, ma'am, y'all got to sit up. I'm like, really? But they gave us the family room with a code, and just my family was allowed in there. And I'm like, you got all these other people with other kids out in this room, and the kids are sleeping all miserable. And, but we had our own privacy and stuff. And so, that was just favor from the Lord. Even someone donated $1,000 to help us with the move, and that was exactly the amount of money we needed to get the rental vehicle and food and gas all the way to Colorado.
That's amazing. I just love, it's one thing to be a military guy or to be a single person and just kind of go on an adventure with God. It's a whole nother thing to have a wife and 6 kids and to go on an adventure with God. So hats off to both of you for the walk of faith that you have. Did either of you ever hear something from God and be like, God, you're going to have to tell them, because I ain't telling, they're going to have to hear this from you, or they're going to think I'm nuts?
I think it was mostly, for me, it was when we're in Australia, because her family's there and that's her home. And that's why I would wait, I would pray about it. And I'm like, all right, Lord, you're going to have to tell her, because, she's, we got to be on the same page and stuff. And
I did appreciate that about him. Like, whenever he started hearing something from the Lord, he was never just dogmatic about it and said, look, this is what I hear, this is what God's saying, and we're going. He would just kind of bring it up as a question. And then when I would be like, no, that doesn't sound right, he would leave it. And then maybe a few days or a week later, he would bring it up again. I'd be like, why are you bringing that up again? I said no the first time. But then, because it's already like a bug in my ear, and I start looking at then God starts speaking to me personally about, I'm looking at the circumstances. Okay, I thought this was our place called there, and things was just going to flow, and there's a closed door and a closed door and a closed door. And so I start thinking, well, maybe it is time. And by the time he sent that text, it was probably like the 3rd time he brought it up. I was just like, oh, that's probably why the doors aren't opening, because it is time to go back. And even though emotionally I wasn't ready, like I even had tears in my eyes, and I was talking to the Lord, and the Lord said, I'll carry you. And I thought, we're going to be gone 2-3 years tops, and here we are,
still here
8, 9, 10 years. I think it's been 8 years since, and no plans on going back.
Maybe to visit,
but
Well, if you have to go back, you have your own airplanes now, so right.
Yeah, that'll be a doozy though. Yes.
I don't think our little sundowner will get us across that Pacific Ocean at this point. Yeah,
We could do it.
We could do it.
We could do it.
It'll be a miracle.
Wow, that's crazy. That would be one heck of a flight.
Mm-hmm.
Flight. Now, the other thing that I loved interviewing you, Donna, is just hearing so much about your family, about the relationship that you have with your kids, and how you talk to them about their dreams and the stuff that they hear from the Lord. Did you have a dream that you wanted to share with us while we're on tonight?
Yeah, I could share a dream that my son had that sounded really powerful, and to see what insights you have, because it kind of baffles me a little bit. And so he actually dictated it to me, and I actually just wrote it down as he was telling me, and fixed it for punctuation just so you can actually read it right. So this was back in August of 21, and he said, I dreamed that my family and I were in a home that looked like the one we are in now, but the upstairs was different. When you walked upstairs, there were big windows and you could see big mountains and a river flowing nearby that looked like the Guadalupe River, which is a river that's nearby. The house was peaceful and had a super great atmosphere. You could feel the presence of God in the home here and there, and I felt blessed that everything we could ever need was right nearby. We could go to the Guadalupe and swim in the river and jump off tires, etc. Mum and Dad left the home together like they usually did to get something to eat or go to the store. After they left, a darkness started to enter the home. I could visibly see it. I could see the manifestation in my siblings. Justin hit Judah, and there was unrest. I was wondering what was going on and why the atmosphere was off. Then a thought came to me to check out the attic and the basement of our home. And in the natural, we have got a little attic, but we don't have a basement in our actual home. Then he said, I went to the attic first, and as I opened the hatch, I heard a weird, low rumble, and I felt darkness flow past me like a wind flowing out the door when I opened it. It was like I had allowed the darkness into the home. In the attic, I immediately smelled a rancid and overwhelmingly rotten smell. I saw a deceased couple in the far left corner of the attic. They were holding each other like they had died together. I wanted to look to see if they were wearing wedding bands, but I didn't want to get close enough to see. There was also feces from the couple all over the attic. At first, I thought it was animal feces, like from a raccoon, but when I saw the couple, I knew it had come from them and that they had been there for a long time. I left the attic in a rush. It was an abrupt change to the atmosphere that I wasn't ready for. When Mum and Dad left earlier, I already started to feel the darkness descending, but after opening the attic, it was too much to bear. When I closed the hatch to the attic, the darkness remained, but the smell immediately vanished as if there was nothing in the attic at all. It was strange. I was expecting a lingering smell of feces, but there was none. Immediately, I went down to check the basement in case it was the same issue down there. When I opened the door to the basement, there was another deceased couple holding each other exactly the same as the first couple. There was also feces, but there was no smell this time. There also wasn't a change in the darkness in the home when I opened the attic. The darkness remained the same as when I opened the attic. However, I had even more of an unsettling feeling come over me. I didn't tell anyone about that. I wanted to tell my mum and dad, but I had to wait until they came home. I knew that the doors that I had opened affected my siblings. There was no joy in the home. They were all depressed. The glow that I normally see in them had disappeared, and I had an immediate sense of guilt. My mum and dad came home and came into the house, but they didn't seem to be affected by what was going on with the rest of us. Dad might have been a little, but mum seemed fine. I just remembered in the dream that I was really young and small. I came up to Dad's waist, and this is how I see myself around Dad. I don't see myself as taller than him, even though I am. I see myself as really small compared to him. I was too overwhelmed with guilt that no matter how much I wanted to tell Mum and Dad, I just could not come forward with what I had done. It was a special occasion of some sort. We were making a special dinner, and there was barely any natural light in the home. So not only was there a spiritual darkness, there was also natural darkness. I noticed that Mum and Dad emitted light from themselves. Mum's light was noticeably brighter than Dad's light. My siblings also emitted a little light from themselves, but unlike Mum and Dad, who emitted light from their entire bodies, my siblings emitted light from their hearts, and the glow would flicker subtly as their hearts would beat. And then my son cried a lot as he told me this part of the dream. He said, what really hit me hard was seeing Justin. He had just lost all joy and happiness. He was just sitting down, depressed and emotionless. Judah had lost the joy that he had. He just didn't have it anymore. I felt really guilty about that. He can be annoying, but I feel like I'm always squashing his joy. Then Will's parents came over. They were smiling until they opened the door. They came in and had no emotion, even though we hadn't seen them in years. I stepped back and saw what I did to everyone. End of dream.
Wow. That's a really, really powerful dream. It's interesting because I believe that what that dream is talking about specifically is not necessarily your family in particular, but the state of current events in our country. So something hidden in the attic, something that's dead and smells like feces is interesting. It's the idea of the hidden things being exposed. Like you think of something up in the attic, it's usually the attic is a second story, which means there's another story. It's a play on words, just like if there's a second story in your home in a dream, there's what's going on at the base level, and then there's another story of what's really happening behind the scenes. Like you could put on a smiley face as the deacons of the church, but they could have a horrible marriage at home,
Mm-hmm.
And so what's happening during dreams like that is God is revealing the second story. But in particular, the attic is even a lot of times a third story, depending on the makeup of your house. In your house, is your attic on the second story or the third?
It would be the third for us.
The third, yeah. And so there's another story, but then even above that, there's something that's a place that very rarely do people go. It's where typically we put a lot of pictures and memories and things that are hidden or things in storage or whatever. And so when that gets opened up, things are getting exposed. And it's the idea, I believe, of truth and righteousness coming out. Now, what's really interesting is the names of your sons that were involved in the altercation in the dream were just Judah. And of course, we know Judah means praise, but praise literally means to declare. Like, I will live that I might declare the goodness of God or praise God, right? The idea of declaring, particularly when you're talking about goodness, is what praise is. So think of praise as, in the purest form, the mission of the mainstream media. That's not what we know them to be, because they're not declaring goodness at all. They're declaring death, and they're declaring things that stink, which is really, there's another word for feces, especially if it comes from a male cow. And that's what the media has been shoveling a lot of BS, right? It's a lot of garbage. It's just like, no, this is fake news. This isn't real. This isn't really what's happening. But hidden behind that and behind the stench of the smell of what they're putting out is really the scandal, is the death of this couple, whatever that means. And a couple a lot of times represents covenant, like a marriage, right? And so the death of a couple can mean the death of a covenant, which can mean a covenant like when we join the military, we swear to uphold the Constitution, right? And politicians do the same thing. And so the death of a covenant can be a breach between nations. Our nation has allied with Israel. But if you get an administration in there that isn't as friendly as the last administration was, there can be a breach of covenant. There can be treaties. There can be a violation of treaties, a violation of our word, but even a violation of our position as a group of world leaders. And so it represents a violation of covenant that's been hidden away that people don't want to talk about. Well, what's happening is that's getting opened up and exposed. What was the name of your son that had the dream?
Jerome.
What is Jerome?
William Jerome.
Yeah, he's William Jerome III. I think William means like strong protector, and Jerome is something along the same lines.
Jerome is sacred name.
That's right.
Interesting. Well, the whole idea of sacred name is the idea of identity. And of course, obviously, he carries the name of his father too, William.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the idea of a generational inheritance. And so God is showing the next generation and the inheritance what is happening in America. Now, Justin means righteous, and Judah means praise. And so Justin is also a variant, and it's kind of like the word. I don't know that this is the actual root, but it sounds a lot, and a lot of the letters are the same as in justice.
And that's why I named him Justin, actually.
It's interesting too, because there's a play on words. My whole family for 3 generations has the initial JMR. And so we always talk about J names, and we always threaten to name one of our kids Justin with the middle name Time, Justin Time. So that's kind of like a play on words, but it's the idea that it's time for justice. And when it's time for justice, that may be an affront to those who are declaring the news, as in praise, as in Judah. And so Justin hits Judah. And so it's the idea of when this exposure happens, there's going to be a flood of justice and righteousness that's going to come in that is going to whack the media in the face. And it's going to be like, everything you've told us was a lie. And we can see, even with what's happening right now, if you turn on any channel today, tomorrow, what's going on right now, particularly in DC, is we are being fed a coordinated series of a string of lies. And most people know it. And they've even hired, TV producers to come in and to orchestrate this circus, this clown show of what they're doing and what they're talking about in the news right now. But this is an ongoing thing. We know that propaganda has been used by administrations, the government, intelligence agencies to try to hide things and distract people from what is really happening. Well, that's all fun and games, and you can keep the dead couple in the attic until somebody goes there. But once you open that door, and especially if there's feces up there, and now the smell and the evil presence fills the whole house, now something has to be done. And this is the day that we're in America. We've reached a critical mass. The only way that people can deny that there's injustice in America is if they willfully bury their head in the sand and they become willfully ignorant and stupid. In the age of the internet, there's no longer an excuse. Oh, well, I didn't know human trafficking was real. You're an idiot. Do research. You have the internet, look it up. There's people screaming it from the rooftops, and all these ministries, all the stuff is going on. Just because you buy into identity politics and you want to identify with people that lie to you all the time, or because you like listening to the mainstream media, that doesn't absolve you from the opportunity to vote correctly and to do what is necessary to defend the republic that God gave us and defend freedom and liberty for our families and future generations. And so that's what's happening, is that evil presence has kind of come in. And I even think about where we were 3 or 4 years ago, where we never talked conversations, and even conversations in dreams like we're having now about an administration or how inept leadership is. And that's the idea of mom and dad left the house. Competent leadership was gone. And in the absence of leadership, what happens? Well, exposure is going to happen. And what happens when exposure happens? They turn on one another. And so this is all like a prophetic allegory of what is happening in the nation right now. And so he was the one, William Jerome, carrying the name of the Father, the second in line, right? The one who would take the mantle in the absence of leadership. He opens the door, and once that door is open, it's like Pandora's box. The evil presence pervades the whole house. The smell is out there. Everybody knows that there's feces or BS that's hidden away somewhere because you can smell it throughout. And now suddenly they're turning on each other because they're not the strong leaders. Like you guys were entire beings of light. Their hearts were light, but they had to guard their hearts, because if they were pervaded with this propaganda, this evil, this low frequency garbage that is pumped into homes all across America 24 hours a day, every single day, then it can literally flicker their hearts and their lights can start to go out. And so I thought it was really interesting and really telling that William Jerome, seeing the exposure and finding what was happening on the attic, decided, I need to get down to the foundation. We need to get down to the basis of things. And this is also what's happening in America. There's a lot of people that are becoming researchers, that are hearing from God, or they're hearing what other people are saying. They're like, you know what? I'm going to study history myself. And people that were never historians are now becoming experts on, did this really happen the way we think it did? And who really is the party of slavery and Jim Crow? And where did the KKK come from? And how did World War II really end? And what's the roots of the deep state? And what about the pharmaceutical? I mean, people are asking all kinds of questions that they never asked before. Before, we just kind of trusted doctors. If we had to get a shot, we got a shot. It was no big deal. If this, that, all these kind of things are now like our whole reality is shifted, where now we want to question everything. And so that's the whole idea of William Jerome is going to now go down into the foundation of things. I'm going to go down in the basement, and obviously it's not literal because you don't have a basement. I'm going to go down to the basement, and I'm going to find out at the foundation of things what's going on. Well, guess what we find at the foundation? Another dead covenant, another couple that's deceased, that's down there, the same stuff, the same feces. Really, it's the same thing that was up in the attic is down in the basement, but it doesn't smell. And the reason it doesn't smell is because at the foundations means it's old. You could have feces up in your attic, and if it's a year old, it probably has some smell. If it's 50 years old, it's not going to smell anymore. So that's the idea of what's been birthed into the foundation of different parts of our growth as an American civilization, particularly in the last 80 years. There's been so much that happened at the end of World War II that has seeded everything that we're experiencing now. And God has shown us that through a series of dreams. But what's being exposed is all the lies that we're currently being told. What's hidden in the attic now, still fresh, still stinks, lots of poo, and a dead couple. But when we do our research and we get down to the basis of things, we see that, well, that's kind of similar to what's kind of always been there. There's always been groups of people in our country that have been 100% for the spirit of oppression in whatever form it looked like, and for the spirits of genocide and eugenics and all of these things. They're not new. They haven't been around for just 10 or 20 years. They've been around for a long time. And it's those spirits that are the ones that are trying to hide things. It's the very people that are saying, well, those guys are the racists, or those guys are the ones that are the scandalous actors, the insurrectionists, the whatever term you want to use. It's really them. It's all deflection. And so what's interesting is what happens when mom and dad comes home is when the house can be put in order, because the weak hearts, the ones that hearts are flickering, they need the infusion of real leadership. They need the beings of light to come into the place to be able to end the infighting, clean up the mess, and deal with the situation. And that's what the two of you represent. You represent this, mature adult couple who are raising 6 incredible children, and you have this amazing faith in God that you'll literally go anywhere in the world at his word, whether you have the finances and the resources to get there or not, or, buy a flight school or an airport or who knows, whatever God has for you. You guys are all in, and that's how your son sees you, and that's how the world is going to see us. It's the whole idea of the earth groans for the sons and daughters to be revealed, because it's interesting that at the start of the dream, he wasn't talking about the beings of light. But now that the exposures happen and the deep darkness has entered the house, when there is darkness and even deep darkness, that's when the light is the brighter. And so you guys as the leaders and the beings of light stepping into that situation are going to cause change. And it's the allegory too of the church. And it's not, I don't even like to say the church anymore, because the church is so dramatically different post 2019 than it was before, because of everything we went through and the people that, the cowards that shut their meetings down and they kowtowed to whatever the oppressors said. Well, you can't sing and you can't have worship, and Judah got punched in the face, that kind of a thing. And then there's the very few pastors that stood up and said, I'm not going to shut down, and you can arrest me and you can do whatever you want, and we're going to continue to praise God, and you're not going to silence the word, and the word is going to go forth. And even the movements of people that have gone out and brought worship to our cities and have continued to hold the line in what they're doing and bringing praise and worship. But what's interesting is we're beyond the phase of hold the line. Hold the line is not the war cry, I believe, anymore. The line, the war cry now should be advance. We need to take ground. And that's what happened when the beings of light entered the home. That's when the evil is going to dissipate. That's when we're going to deal with the stuff in the basement and the stuff in the attic. That's when the infighting is going to stop. The unity is going to come together, and the hearts of the young ones, the influenceable ones, are going to be brighter because of your presence. And I think it's an identity and destiny dream about your family, about William Jerome, but also he's revealing things to him about mom and dad, but also about the destiny of our nation in this critical hour and what it's like to be a remnant that shines brightly in utter darkness.
It's amazing.
It's good.
He's definitely going to be, encouraged to hear this interpretation for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. How old is he?
16.
Wow, that's amazing. And he's a dreamer. And
he's a dreamer and he's a seer. Both my two oldest, they see a lot in the spirit, and
myself.
Oh, and him. Yeah, they see a lot in the spirit, and so that's another thing that I've had to kind of learn how to even teach them about, the spirit realm when I can't see it like they do. Like they see it like they see it. And my daughter sees things, and I'm having to help her to, know her authority in Christ. And, they can't do anything to you without your consent and cooperation, use your authority, and just, helping her to cultivate that gifting without allowing the enemy to make her so afraid of seeing that she just wants it to be gone,
Yeah.
My oldest.
And to guard the hearts. And I think we've been, the Lord has had us really kind of sheltering them, not in the sense to where they're, some kids, the parents shelter them so much they can't function in society. No, we don't do that. But as far as spiritually, we're very protective of who they are, because the enemy doesn't play fair. He doesn't play fair. He'll take cheap shots and to try to steal and snuff out that light. And so, even with a lot of the moving around, because sometimes the kids are just like, how come, we just keep moving, and I meet somebody and then we just move around. I said, well, the Lord knows, what you have need of, and the Lord knows your heart and stuff. But at the same time, we've got to be obedient to what God wants us to do, because he has a reason for everything. And things are just going to be just fine, as long as we're in obedience with him. And so, they are very, they're very sharp. And, even with, we were taking them to some churches, youth group, and we coming back, they always had these questions and just did not, they weren't really feeling it because of just the people.
Just the level of where everyone was at. Jerome tells a story that, he was listening to one of his, peers at the youth group, and he had an issue. And my son said, you should talk to the Lord about that. Why don't you pray about it? And the boy said, I thought you were better than that.
Wow.
And it's church, know?
Yeah.
Well, I love the fact that they're living it for real, and they're going to be so much further ahead. We talk in our culture as the spiritual intelligence mentorship and the spiritual intelligence service. We talk a lot about kids and raising kids, and we encourage people to talk to their kids about dreams and dream experiences and encounters, and give them a flavor for the things of God at this age. And I love that your kids have grown up with that hunger and have seen you guys take incredible steps of faith and have been involved. They've been on the plane with you when you're in space, say, coming back from Australia. Like, they've lived it with you, the journey and the adventure. And that is incredible. It's amazing.
And they really see it when they're talking to when they did go to youth group and they were talking to their friends, they just then they realized how wild our life is, how, we moved across the country, we moved across the world, we've done this, done that, done the other thing. And then they talk to, then the people that they're with, they're like, well, I've just lived in this town my whole life and haven't gone anywhere, haven't really done anything of note. Like, they've got nothing to add to the conversation. And then my kids really realize how amazing it is, what we've done,
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. Wow. Gosh, it's always such a rich time talking to you both.
Thank you.
We would love to have you guys as part of our part of what we're doing too, and just on an ongoing basis to just continue a relationship with all of you. I'd love to meet you and your kids someday soon. And man, thank you again for, even in back-to-back weeks, Donna, for being on with us, and for Will for hopping in and sharing, a portion of your life and your experience, your military career. Thank you again for your service and for your time today, and just sharing with us a window into what it's like to have a supernatural family and a dreamer family. I love it. It's amazing. So, well, we've come to the end of our time today. And so again, thank you, Will and Donna, for being with us. And we appreciate it. Yeah. And we will talk to you guys soon. And, and thank you all for joining us too and listening today. What a incredible, amazing family. We encourage families to live supernatural with your kids. Do it out loud. Let them know what dreams you're having. Share with them what God is saying to you, and let them be a part of the journey. And I'm telling you, your life and your kids' lives will be so supernatural and so incredible. It'll be absolutely amazing. And the adults that they grow into will blow your mind. So thanks again for joining us on another Dream Talks, and we'll see you next time.